My name is Nick Brand. I'm the Director of Corporate Programs at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome George Fridman to the Chicago Council. I believe it's his first time here, so thank you so much for being with us.
No place is really Pacific for very long. I mean, neither the United States, we have constant wars, okay? Europe will, I suspect, not return to the 31 years, but it will return to humanity. They will have their wars, they will have their peace, they will live their lives. It will not be 100 million dead, but the idea of the European exceptionalism, I think, is the one suffering the first death. There will be conflict. There was conflict in Yugoslavia, and there's certainly conflict now in Ukraine. As to the relationship to the United States, we no longer have a relationship with Europe. We have a relationship with Romania, we have a relationship with France. There is no Europe to have a relationship with.
Yes, the gentleman in the fourth row over here.
Excuse me. By the way, I'm a subscriber. Is Islamic extremism really the major threat to the United States, and will it die on its own, or will it keep growing?
It is a problem to the United States. It is not an existential threat. It has to be dealt with, but it has to be dealt with proportionately. We have other foreign policy interests. So, the primordial interest of the United States, over which for a century we have fought wars, the First, Second Cold War, has been the relationship between Germany and Russia, because united they are the only force that could threaten us, and to make sure that that doesn't happen. If you're a Ukrainian, is essentially reach out to the only country that will help you, which is the United States. Last week, 10 days ago, General Hodges, Commander U.S. Army Europe, visited Ukraine. He announced that U.S. trainers would now officially be coming, not just unofficially coming. He actually pinned medals on Ukrainian fighters, which by protocol of the military is not the way. Foreigners don't get to pin on, medals. But he did, showing that this was his army. He then left and in the Baltics announced that the United States would be pre-positioning armor, artillery, and other equipment in the Baltics, Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria, which is a very interesting point. So the United States, and now yesterday the United States announced that it would be sending weapons. Tonight, of course, they denied it, but they are. The weapons will go. In all of this, the United States has acted outside the context of NATO. Because NATO has to have a 100% vote. Any one country can veto anything. And the Turks will veto it just for giggles. The point is that the United States is prepared to create a cordon sanitaire around Russia. Russia knows it. Russia believes that the United States intends to break the Russian Federation. I think that, as Peter Lorre put it, we don't want to kill you, we just want to hurt you a little bit. Either way, we are back at the old game. And if you go ask a Pole or a Hungarian or a Romanian, they live in a totally different universe from a German. And they live in a totally different universe from a Spaniard. So there is no commonality in Europe. But if I were a Ukrainian, I would do exactly what they're doing. Try to draw the Americans in.
All right, next question, please.
The United States has a fundamental interest. It controls all the oceans of the world. No power has ever done that. Because of that, we get to invade people and they don't get to invade us. It's a very nice thing. Maintaining control of the sea and control of space is the foundation of our power. The best way to defeat an enemy fleet is to not let it be built. The way the British managed to make certain that no European power could build a fleet was to make sure the Europeans are at each other's throats. The policy that I would recommend is the one that Ronald Reagan adopted toward Iran and Iraq. He funded both sides so they would fight each other and not fight us. This was cynical. It was certainly not moral. It worked. And this is the point. The United States cannot occupy Eurasia. The moment the first boot sets the ground, the demographic differential is we are totally outnumbered. We can defeat an army. We cannot occupy Iraq. The idea that 130,000 men would occupy a country of 25 million, well, the ratio in New York of cops to citizens was greater than we had deployed in Iraq. So we don't have the ability to go across, but we do have the ability to, first, support various contending powers so they concentrate in themselves with political support, some economic support, military support, advisors, and in extremis, do what we did in Japan, in Vietnam, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, spoiling attacks. The spoiling attack is not intended to defeat the enemy. It's intended to throw him off balance. What we did in each of these wars, in Afghanistan, for example, is we threw Al-Qaeda off balance. The problem we have, since we're young and stupid, is that having thrown them off balance, instead of saying, okay, job well done, let's go home, we said, well, that was easy. Why don't we build a democracy here? This was the moment of dementia that came in. The answer, therefore, is the United States cannot constantly be intervening throughout Eurasia. It must be selectively intervening and very rarely. That is the extreme moment. We cannot, as the first step, send American troops. And when we send American troops, we have to clearly understand what the mission is, limit it to that, and not develop all sorts of psychotic fantasies. So hopefully we've learned that this time. It takes a while for kids to learn lessons. But I think you're absolutely right. We cannot, as an empire, do that. Britain didn't occupy India. It took various Indian states and turned them against each other and provided some British officers for an Indian army. The Romans did not send vast armies out there. It placed kings like, various kings it created under the emperor, and those kings were responsible for maintaining the peace. Pontius Pilate was an example. So empires that are directly governed by the empire, like the Nazi Empire, fail. No one has that much power. You have to have a level of cleverness. However, our problem is not yet that. It is actually admitting that we have an empire. So we haven't even gotten to that point where we don't think we can kind of go home and it'll be over and done. And so we're not even ready for chapter 3 of the book.
Next question, please. Yes, the gentleman right here in the fourth row.
So I infer from your comments that the euro as the currency will not survive.
The question on the table for the Russians is, will they retain a buffer zone that's at least neutral? Or will the West penetrate so far into Ukraine that they're 70 miles away from Stalingrad and 300 miles away from Moscow? For Russia, the status of Ukraine is an existential threat. And the Russians cannot let go. For the United States, in the event that Russia holds onto the Ukraine, where will it stop? Therefore, it's not an accident that General Hodges, who's been appointed to be blamed for all of this, is talking about prepositioning troops in Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, and the Baltics. This is the intermarium, from the Black Sea to the Baltic, that Pilsudski dreamt of. This is the solution for the United States. The issue to which we don't have the answer is, what will Germany do? So the real wild card in Europe is that as the United States builds its cordon sanitaire, not in Ukraine, but to the west, and the Russians try to figure out how to leverage the Ukrainians out, we don't know the German position. Germany is in a very peculiar position. Its former Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder is on the board of Gazprom. They have a very complex relationship to the Russians. The Germans themselves don't know what to do. They must export. The Russians can't take up the export. On the other hand, if they lose the free trade zone, they need to build something different. For the United States, the primordial fear is Russian capital, Russian technology, German technology and German capital, Russian natural resources, Russian manpower, as the only combination that has, for centuries, scared the hell out of the United States. So how does this play out? Well, the U.S. has already put its cards on the table. It is the line from the Baltics to the Black Sea. For the Russians, their cards have always been on the table. They must have at least a neutral Ukraine, not a pro-Western Ukraine. Belarus is another question. Now, whoever can tell me what the Germans are going to do is going to tell me about the next 20 years of history. But unfortunately, the Germans haven't made up their mind. And this is the problem of Germany always. Enormously economically powerful, geopolitically very fragile, and never quite knowing how to reconcile the two. Ever since 1871, this has been the German question, the question of Europe. Think about the German question, because now it's coming up again. That's the next question that we have to address. And we don't know how to address it. We don't know what they're going to do.
And unfortunately, that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you so much, George Fridman. He'll be signing copies of his book in the rear of the room. Thank you as well to the Chicago Club for co-sponsoring this evening. Good night.